Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Show, proudly a part of Museum of the American Military Family Media. I'm your host, Shannon Hyde, and today we are not the only military kids podcast on the internet. Today we are joined by the host of the Military Brat podcast, Averie Gannon. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to have you on the show. This is very exciting. I saw your podcast, and first of all, I was just excited to see another Military Brat podcast because, there's not very many. I thought I was the only one,
No.
personally.
I did too, and then I looked and I was like, okay, is this gonna be like competition or is this gonna be like cool? Like, are we
No,
gonna
no,
be
no. I
like
think we're cool. I think we're
friends
cool.
or
We're on the same team. I think
bad?
we're cool.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but that's funny you thought that. Yeah, I think we're all right. I think we're good.
Yeah,
We're gonna
absolutely.
get on each other's shows. Yeah, we're all trying to do the same thing here, guys. We're on the same team. We're all having a good time. Um, anyways, I just want to start by asking you about your show and when did you start your podcast?
Well, I started planning it a lot. Like the big idea kind of hit me in like June, and then a
Mhm.
lot of the summer I spent working out all the logistics of it. But I actually launched my first two episodes in on November 1st, so
Yeah.
still really new. Yeah.
Yeah, still, mine started like around in the summer. So whenever you start planning, it was just kind of, I don't know, spur of the moment, wanted to do it for a while. So
You have a
pretty
lot
cool.
more episodes out than I do. I think that's so funny, like the uploading schedules like overlap sometimes, but like I noticed when I was checking out your show, I was like, dang, this kid is pumping them out like crazy. Like I could never.
Yeah, I've been doing it
Oh,
every week, and I haven't missed a week yet. I'm gonna try to keep up with that. But yeah, I went to
oh
college,
my
kept up with it, so we're going hard. Are you doing
that's
every other week or?
I do, yeah, because I was just I was thinking like, oh, okay, well I'll do every week and it'll be fine. And then I realized when I got like back into school and everything, I was like, oh, that's not a
Not that
smart
easy.
idea. I should maybe think about something else first. And then like it kind of came down to
Yeah.
now it's every other week, which works out pretty nicely.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I can understand why that's easier. I might end up doing that at some point as well. It's tough because then like as soon as you get one guest, it's like you have to get another one right after that, especially
I
every week.
know. Oh my gosh. And I like planned mine out in advance because I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have like 20 episodes a season. Yeah, now I'm capping out. I'm like, 10's fine. 10's fine.
Ten's
10's fine.
cool.
Like
Ten's cool.
everyone's cool with that. No one's judging me. It's great.
Yeah,
Like
I haven't even called mine a season yet, so I guess we're just have like 30 in a season. I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. But what made you want to start your podcast? I know you said you started planning it in June, but when were you like, this is what I want to do and why?
so like okay, there's kind of two different like factors that really was like,
Sure.
okay, I should do this. One of them was like, okay, college look at things. They're starting
Mhm.
to like notice kids my age and things like that. And so I was like, I might want to stand out a little bit more. But then also it's always but like the main that pushing factor that was like, okay, I'm gonna do this is like the fact that like I feel like the community that we're a part of and everything,
Yeah.
it's talked about, but it's kind of always like right under your nose and no one really like represents it with like a strong face of everything. And
Yeah, completely
so
agree.
I was kind of like, this is like yeah, it's like it's a time of change. It's 2020. I think people in like the military who live a military lifestyle,
Mhm.
whether it's a good one or a bad one, should talk about it at least, and that should be something that should, be shared with because we were pretty interesting sometimes,
Yeah,
right? Like
completely agree.
everyone's
Yes.
got a good story. Yeah.
I
And so
didn't
that just
even,
kind of
yeah.
propelled. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even consider like the whole college application thing. I think that'd be fantastic because not only have you had like these military kid lifestyle and experiences, but now you're like sharing them and having other people on and talking about them. So I mean, yeah, that's really cool. That's going to look fantastic. And then in terms of the military brat community, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, there should just be more, and there should be places where people feel comfortable to talk about the issues that they're facing. I feel like there's not enough of that on the internet in particular.
And I think the funny part is like they're like everywhere. It's not just like,
Hmm.
oh, we're confined to one little like
Exactly.
space and it's only particular for us in like one state. Like we are like all over the world. And so it's kind of
Absolutely.
just funny. It's funny to me that like it's just kind of passed and not thought about very often, especially with like the appreciation that comes through for the veterans and for the armed services and everything. I think that's amazing. But like the kids go through a lot more psychologically and developmentally that a lot of people really think about and talk about.
Mhm.
So that's what was really going through my mind when I was like, maybe I should talk about this, because like it's a good like it's almost like a good therapy for me too, because it's a lot of just like bottled up things that I have like not talked about in years. And so I
Yeah.
was just kind of like, maybe bring that up, see what happens. Like no one's gonna care. It's just be nice, you know?
Yeah, and it's beyond just like Dodea schools. I mean, there's a lot of public schools where there's like a handful of military kids there, and there's no programs for them. There's no special attention, or like, and a lot of times their needs are differently, like psychologically. So you're right
Mhm.
about that. And yeah, there
Exactly.
should be more done about that, which is what we're doing. We're doing a good job so far. We're gonna keep up with it.
We're trendsetters, man. We got this.
Yes, we're leading the way. Absolutely, we're on the frontier of military rep podcasts. So what in particular do you like to talk about on your show? I mean, so far, I know
Um,
not too much, but is there?
it's been pretty small lately. So it kind of started with like, oh, I'll do like a timeline of like the moving process and everything, and then I kind of realized like because I write down like 5 or 6 questions that need to be like addressed, and then every
Mhm.
once in a while I like throw in one of my own. And when I was throwing in those questions of like myself, I noticed that like kids were getting a lot deeper than I thought they were, or I thought that they could like share. And
Yeah.
so I was like, wait, whoa, like this is kind of like intense. Like I didn't even think
Mhm.
about this. And then that kind of led me down the path of like, okay, what are these like psychological kind of barriers that kids put up when you are in the military?
Mhm.
Like, do you automatically just like kind of are you guys like me, where like when you were first starting like what middle school a million years ago, you were like, I'm just not gonna make any friends. I'm gonna move anyway. I'm just gonna like cut
Yeah,
them
I
off.
I went
Like,
through that as well. I was like, "Nope."
yeah, exactly.
That's
And like
crazy. I
I
did.
noticed, yeah, see, no one even talks about it. And like when I got here,
Yeah.
I told my friends that, and they were like, "We've never thought like that. Like that's never had to happen for us." And I was
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's not normal. Oh no. Okay,
I think
I
yeah.
should like talk about that and spread some awareness to that too." So that kind of yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. I mean, specifically for that. I mean, we don't have to talk too much about this in particular, but I mean, whenever you move somewhere and you know you're not going to be there for very long, there's like a sense of what's the point? Just get me out here, next place.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
I've been
and
through that.
then like we also like discussed on one of the other episodes, we kind of talked about something similar to this, where my friend also brought up there's like that one kid that's like, "Oh, I'm definitely not gonna be here for that long, so I should just like forget about it." But there's
Mhm.
also the other spectrum where you're on the exact opposite, and they're like, "I'm here for a good time, not a long time," and then they just like
Yeah.
develop like great things, and then they leave, and then they're just like, "Oh well," and they're kind of like they kind of let it all out more than the other kid who's like, no, I'm not going to, like,
Yeah,
don't. So it's
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. That's
yeah,
interesting
it
because
just
they're like not
really
there for
depends on
very,
like
very long. Like do whatever
yeah,
they
yeah,
want. Who cares?
exactly.
I'm going anyways.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is there one issue that you're most passionate about then in terms of military brats?
I think mainly a lot of it is just like representation, and I know that like I feel like it's always been really strange for me to advocate for it, because like we're not in any way very like we're very privileged a lot of the time, and I think that's the
Sure.
thing that really comes across
Mhm.
like with all of the lessons that we've been taught. And a lot of people really see that surface face of like, oh, just because you're a military kid, that means you travel a lot and that means you get to live overseas and you have good experiences. But like, and yes, while we do get that, and I think that's amazing, and I think that's also should be just
Yeah.
equally talked about, and I don't want to brag about it either, but like I also feel like it's good to represent those underlying like other things that go on in being a military child. Like, oh yeah, like I move like a lot, and I don't
Hmm.
necessarily, and I've developed this way to keep friendships, I've developed this way to lose friendships and things like that. And just like kind of digging beneath that, oh, you travel a lot kind of stereotype, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's always that's always hard for me to talk about, because I'm always like, I don't know if like I'm the right person to say stuff like that, just especially because I've had a really good run of it. So
Yeah.
it's strange for me to try to like be like, oh yeah, totally, like let's do this, but I'm also like, but I also feel for you, it's kind of like it's weird.
Yeah. You I mean spot on with that in terms of it can be hard to open up because you just assume that everyone thinks you get to travel. Like, shut up, what are you talking about? Like, you have like the coolest
Exactly.
lifestyle,
It's
and you
yeah.
get like reinforced with that as well. Because like I don't know, I'm not sure where you lived. I was in Oki for a few years, Okinawa, and whenever I
Same.
share
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
story from that, yeah, people are like, "Oh, that's the coolest thing ever," yada yada yada. And like you don't want to share the bad side with people because I mean, like no one wants to hear that.
Exactly.
So a lot
And
of it
even
just kind
to
of
an
like stays
extent,
with you.
yeah, exactly. And even sharing an extent to like all the good sides, after a while of sharing a few stories, you're like, I'm talking too much about this. Like they
Yeah,
don't really want
exactly.
to hear this anymore. Like yeah, yeah, they're kind of like they're over it. Like move on.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, I feel like that should also be kind of talked about too, because like I love to share my stories, but like
yeah.
I don't want to be the one person in the room that's like, oh, I've been to Japan, I
I'm
blah blah
better
blah,
than
like
that.
yeah, and then I'm this, and then everyone's like, oh, better than thou, and I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be like that. I'm just like, this is like the life I had, and
Yeah,
I this is the only thing I can relate to you with right now. So like that's all I can
yeah.
offer.
And it's a very fine line, and like, am I sharing too much? Like, because it's like something that's important about you, and that's been your entire life. So whenever you're talking about yourself, it's hard not to bring that up. Like, there's times whenever I talk to someone, and I'm like, I'm not gonna bring up Japan. I'm not gonna bring up being a military kid. Like, there's other things about me. There is more to my personality than moving around.
I know. Oh my god, it's so bad. I literally I'll sit there, I'm like, just only mention it one time. If they dig deeper,
Mhm.
they dig deeper. But like don't go into it because it makes you
Yes.
look so like bad. And I didn't notice it until really I moved back to a like a civilian school, because when you're
Yeah.
overseas and everyone's in it with you and they're all over there too, you kind of just talk about that and they're like, oh, I
Mhm.
went to Thailand. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I went to Cambodia. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. Like
Yeah.
common
Sick.
conversation, and like it's easy. And then you come here and then like the jaws are on the floor and I'm like, oh my god, I've said way too much. Like,
Mhm.
okay, let's talk about something different.
Yeah. Can we move on?
Yeah.
It's a weird situation. 100%. So I noticed in your podcast title, BRAT is an acronym. Did you make it up, the acronym? What does it
I
stand for? I'm not sure.
so this is funny.
Okay.
I was so my dad is the one in the military, right? And so
Mhm.
I was developing the show and I showed it to him, and he would always like kind of correct me on it. He'd be like, that's supposed to be an acronym. That's supposed to be an acronym. And I was like, okay, so then like what does it stand for? Like, pray tell, let me in on this big secret. Like, what
Okay.
does it stand for? Because as far as I've known, this just means you travel a lot and you're a kid in the military. And
This
he's
is a
like, no,
word,
no,
yes.
no. This is a whole thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so apparently back when America was still part of like the British regime and everything,
Mhm.
it was BRAT stood for British Regime Attached Traveler. So like every time a soldier would bring
Wow.
his family or a spouse with him, that's what that stood for. And then kind of people just like forgot it was an acronym, and they kind
Yeah, I had
of
no idea.
developed it as to like the term. It's weird, right? Like I never
Yeah,
would have thought.
that is
It's
interesting because
just
there's so many acronyms just in the military in general. Whenever you're growing up and you hear the acronyms, it's just a word. Like it just means something. Exactly. It's just like a part of your vocabulary. And you'll see it spelled out for the first time. And they're like, there's periods in there. There's dots.
yeah, exactly. And like, or
Just
even developing it, like, even my friends that are in the military, they looked at that, they're like, is that really supposed to be like that? I don't know. That doesn't look right. And I was like, no, no, no.
Yeah, I
I
didn't even
promise.
know.
I
So
like, exactly. Like, not a lot of people
yeah, that
know
was one of my
that.
questions. I'm like, I have to know what this is. Yeah, you learn something new every day, guys. There you go. Um,
Mhm.
so whenever you started your podcast, what were some of the big challenges that you faced just getting it started? And I know you said with school coming up, you're not able to upload as often, but were there anything else that was a challenge for you?
Hmm. I mean, a lot of it, I'll start though with saying it was a lot easier than I thought it was gonna be, which
Okay.
is like I expected there to be a lot more like obstacles I had to go through, but I think probably the most challenging part was just really honestly the one thing I could think of was setting up like websites. That was just
Yeah.
too much hassle for too long, and like having to convince my parents. I'm like, no, I'm legitimately gonna do this. Like
Yeah.
this is like real. Like, and they were on board with it after a while, but it kind of took some like really good communication of like, no, this isn't just like a weird idea I'm gonna leave and drop after 2 weeks like I've done
Yeah.
in the past. No, like I'm investing in equipment. I'm getting like a website build up. I'm getting like a podcast account and everything. And they're like, oh, you're serious. I'm like, yes, like really. And so
Yeah.
I think maybe that just kind of like both building the website and kind of the actuality of like, no, this is really happening. And the worst part probably actually was keeping it a secret. I did not talk about it until I released it. And that was challenging because I wanted to tell all my friends here. I was like, guess what I'm doing? But like I couldn't. I was like, don't blow it. Like you got like this will be so cool if you just like or like barely tell anybody, or like I told like 2 people. And then of course that spread like a wildfire and I was like, oh no, that was a bad idea. But I mean it kind of just when I released it, it was still a big enough surprise to people to be like, oh wow, this is cool, this is nice. So
Yeah, I was very similar because whenever you don't have anything yet, you don't want to say anything and then disappoint and then nothing happen, if that makes sense. You don't want to start talking about it because I mean there is things that like I'll start similarly where it's I do it like once or twice or 1 or 2 episodes and then I don't keep up with it. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. Either life just gets in the way, or you're just like, I just don't really want, like I don't feel
Yeah.
like doing it. But
I
like
lost the
I
passion for
think
it.
I exactly, yeah. And I think also the fact that I planned and worked on it for a lot longer than I do my other things, then my parents were kind of like, oh, okay, so she's kind of serious about this one, like she actually kind of wants this to
Kind of
happen, like okay.
serious. Okay, so now that's funny. I want to start talking about your personal military brat experiences. Just your lifestyle and where you've been. So if you could just share the places where you have lived.
Yes. So I was born in San Diego. I lived in San Diego for 8 years, and that was because my dad did like overseas deployments, but like the ones you can't like follow, so like Afghanistan and Iraq and things like that. So
Gotcha.
we ended up not we stayed in San Diego for a lot longer than we thought because that's where my whole mom's side is on San Diego, and my dad's side is like just barely outside of San Diego. So like all families there. And then my dad went to go do some extra teaching and some extra courses, and we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. We lived there for about 9-10 months, so just barely making the school year. And like that was an interesting one too. Actually, Charlottesville was really pretty, and it was like it was interesting. And then by that point, I was in between 3rd and 4th grade that summer, and then we got orders to Japan, which was actually not as scary as I remember. I remember like looking back on it now, I'm like, I should have been a lot more like frightened of what was about to happen. Like you moved over 7,000 miles and you didn't even like blink an eye, but you were just fine with it. Like I probably should have had some kind of reflex, but I guess not. And then I lived on Okinawa for 5 years, and just in 2019 I moved to Virginia again. So now I live up in Northern Virginia, and instead of more like central. And then we are not moving again, so we keep it open just because it's so like we don't know anymore. So
Yeah, that's awesome, especially spending 5 years in Japan. I loved it there personally. I was there for 3 years, my freshman through junior year of high school.
I saw your Kubi jacket. I was like,
Yeah,
get
there.
out, man. That's awesome. I mean, I was a Kadena kid, but like we don't gotta
Oh
have bad
wow.
blood.
Okay, we don't have to talk about that, but that's
We don't
okay.
gotta talk about that.
First Kadena kid on the podcast, guys. I'm sorry.
Get out of here!
This is the official official Kuwasaki podcast.
Oh
Not
no,
really, but
I've tainted it, man. I'm
yeah.
sorry,
How
but not
dare
that
you?
sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know. It's fine. We're having a good time. So you said San Diego, then Virginia. Wherever you moved to Japan, you said you weren't frightened. How old were you then?
I was probably 10, 9 or
Yeah.
10. So I kind of just I think it was really nice because my mom like she like really eased me into it more than anything. Where like she got me signed up with like lessons a year before we left. So like right when we got to Charlottesville, we started taking Japanese lessons
Oh wow.
and like and yeah, and so and then she kind of started like introducing us more slowly into like Asian culture and things like that, and like the kind of the yeses and the nos of like, okay, so you can do this, but don't do that, like and kind of keeping you on a good track of everything. And then eventually, once by the time we actually got there, it was just kind of like I could recognize signs and symbols, and like I could recognize the money, I could recognize a few things here and there, and that just I think that kind of really like opened a lot of doors for me too, because I was like, okay, I'm a little more ready this time, like I think
Yeah, it's
it'll be
awesome.
okay.
Shout out to mom. That's
I
perfect.
know she did so
That's the way
good.
to do it right there. You learn everything beforehand. So, do you have any strategies moving to Japan in particular, or anywhere for that matter, when it comes to making friends and adjusting and adapting?
I would say a lot of people will tell you just to be open all the time, but if you're like me, I had a little bit of trouble doing that. Like I'm a very like extroverted person, but I'm also not one to just tap somebody on the shoulder and be like, "You want to be friends?" Like that's a little rough for me. Like I don't know why. I just had a hold up with that for some reason. But I think the easiest way to do it is to like get your groundings first at your school and kind of just like focus on getting yourself to where you need to be for the first like 2 days, 2 or 3 days, and just being like, okay, I
Yep.
understand where I need to go. And then after that, you'll start to subconsciously realize like, oh, she's in this class, oh, but she's also in this class, oh, he and I have this class together. And that's when you can kind of start to like then sort of reach out and be like, oh, do you want to work on this group project together? Or
Mhm.
hi, how are you? I'm not doing anything. Like, and I kind of remember very vividly. It was a weird moment in I was transitioning friend groups here, and I remember I was talking to one of the girls that I'm very close with now, and but before I just asked her, I was like, "You should invite me to sit next to you at lunch." And I said that, and then immediately after, I was like, I went home and I was like, "Oh my god, that was so incredibly awful and rude and horrible." And but then she texted me and she was like, "That was so confident. I loved it." I was like, "Oh,
Whatever
so thanks,
works.
yay!" Just like, "Yay, thank you." So totally meant that.
That's funny. And whenever you do move to a new place, there is like a couple days where you have to spend just learning the area, learning your school, because everyone else, especially when you move to a public school or civilian school, everyone knows you're the new kid. Everyone knows who you are. So like you're just like I don't want to say sticking out, but you're obviously the new person taking time to get adjusted, and it's the kind of people I think the people who you become friends with and you remember whenever you move to place is the people who help you in those times that I think become long-term friends, and I think it's really important. Shout out to those people. If you're not a military kid and you help out, and you talk to a military kid on the first day of school after they move there.
Yes, absolutely, because it's just you really start to realize like how much it's weird how much of like when you go into a public school you kind of develop this weird like reputation of like people hear stories from you but then they get a little twisted and a little it's like telephone, and then eventually you're known throughout your grade as the kid who's a full-time Japanese exchange student. That happened. And and you're
Sounds about right.
like, no, 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 not true. But like you kind of have to clear it up a little bit. But then once that those people kind of once you get those reciprocating like I for a lack of better word reciprocating vibes from them, and you
Yeah.
kind of start to really just like get that feeling of like, okay, we could be friends, like this could work. And then if it still is working, like with I have a really secure friend group right now, but it did take a while to develop just because of the fact that we were all trying to work out our own problems and our own kinks, but we also wanted to stay close friends throughout this whole COVID period and everything. But now we're all good and everything, so it's all just kind of nice. And I'm very shout out to literally all of you. So
Yeah, if you do that, you're welcome on the podcast anytime. Those kind of kids. I had some. Oh yeah, so COVID. We were talking about COVID. Also, I just can't imagine people who are moving to a place for the first time, and halfway through their first year there, maybe have a friend group, maybe don't yet. COVID, erase everything, start from scratch. So.
it really messed a lot. My sister, we moved at the same time, obviously, but like she's a little more shy than I am, and so she kind of was like she swapped friend groups like 4 times in COVID because she's like, I didn't get enough time to get to know people, and I was like, that's true, and I didn't really realize that until we started really talking about it. I was like, so many like young kids are moving as military children, and they can't like develop these bonds for at least another good 6 months. It's so awful. It kind of hurts a little bit.
Yeah, and they're like growing up because like especially during the high school years, like you change a lot during this time, and whenever you go that long without being social, I don't know, it's like kind of scary stuff, especially for military kids, and then they come back to school and you don't know anyone, and your social skills are also rusty to say the
And they're
least.
down the drain, man. Whew, boy,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
what we're
easy.
here for. We're here to talk to you guys. We're gonna improve your social skills
Exactly,
while you're
exactly.
battered down in your house. So that's what we're here for. So now I just want to talk about Japan just for a few more minutes because I love talking about Japan with people. Do you have a favorite
Sure, yes.
memory from that place, or like something that you just loved, or
I
food, anything?
Um, well, I love all of the food was amazing. And I literally and a lot of the time people are like, "Okay, like all of it." I'm like, "Actually,
Pretty
yes,
much.
all of it." Like it was pretty much like tons across the board. It was really great. And I I think that was just kind of I never really like a lot of my core memories were developed in Japan, so it was always strange for me to come back here and weirdly the weird thing was like not having all this immediate access to everything that I did in Japan because it makes you realize like how close quarters everything is and how like
Yeah.
oh I could walk down the street to go get my nails done, get a bowl of ramen and visit a friend. They're all on the same street. And like that was the easiest thing to do. And then now I'm out here and like a good chunk of my friends live like a half hour away and I'm like I didn't even think about that. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of just like the kind of the spreading out, but I think my favorite memory would probably be just kind of like the whole like I guess I mean I kind of went through a lot of different developmental periods because I had like my last few years of elementary school and I had my whole time at middle school and everything there, but like I think personally I really enjoyed the transition between like my school got remodeled, so when it was Kadena Middle School. We were staying at Ryuki Middle School, but then when it got remodeled, we got this new like place, and it was really up to date. It was pretty state of the art, and I really enjoyed that kind of transition between it and kind of navigating what it would have been like for me to go to high school there. And that was kind of
Yeah.
strange for me. I was supposed to, but then that opportunity um kind of went away since I moved and everything, but like I still went through the same process that everybody else did to get ready for high school, like touring Kadena and getting on
Yeah.
all of these different like extracurricular stuff. And so then to move here and just kind of be like thrown into it, I kind of was like, I'm a little prepped though. Like I'm okay, like I have a
It's okay.
little
You
bit
didn't
of
want to be a Panther
experience.
anyways. Let's be honest. You don't want to be a Kadena
No,
Panther. Come on, guys, please.
of course.
Never.
No, no, no.
You got out of there at the right time. I know I know it must not have been easy for you, but it's just moves we have to make. And another thing you mentioned, like whenever you're last year at a school, like so eighth grade, fifth grade, I guess those are the years, and you have to like they start getting you ready with the orientation process for your next school, and you know that you're moving. That sucks. I hate that. I think I had to do that once.
That's the worst.
Yes. And you're like with your friends, and they're so excited to go to this new place, and you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna be here, but I have to,
Well,
walk around this stupid middle school that I'm gonna be not going to.
it's weird. You're kind of like the groups. You're kind of like the Debbie Downer. Kind of feels
Yeah.
bad. You sit there and
Feel
and they're all like, "Oh my gosh, did you see the new cafeteria? Did you see the new blah blah blah?" And I'm like, "I'm not gonna be here that long. I guess I shouldn't go see it." And they're like, "Oh my god, shut up, move on, go. Like just go see it." And like it's just it
Yeah, it
kind
can
of
be hard for
it's
people to
fun
relate.
for
Yeah, I don't.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, now at least here, I mean, I've known people that have lived here their whole lives, and so they kind of just transition from one school to the next as everyone else does. And
Mhm.
so for me to kind of like describe that to them, especially past the point of like, oh, I know we're all trans. I was lucky enough to get a moving period where everybody automatically transitions like from eighth grade to
Yeah.
ninth grade. So for that to like kind of I guess for that kind of like switch to be like mandatory. That was a little easier on me. But then at the same time, I still had to describe like, well, I went to orientations, but not for this school, and so they were
Exactly.
very far away.
So you're unfamiliar, and I guess I would agree with that. If you're gonna move, I guess in between schools is kind of nice because everyone's somewhat making a transition. And you also mentioned kids who have lived in one place for their entire life, and those kids, I know there's a lot of them, but whenever I meet one and I talk to them, like it is just the most amazing thing to me. And I'm not sure if I
It,
feel bad for them or if I'm jealous. Like it's very mixed emotions whenever I meet someone who's been living in the
oh
same
my
house
gosh,
for 18 years or
thank you
whatever.
so
Yeah.
much for understanding that. That is so like
Yes.
spot on of exactly how I feel. Like I love I have one friend here in particular. He comes to mind because we talked about it a few times, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what is your life like? Like do you just like do you stay at like do you live in the same house? Do you move houses? Have you ever moved a house? And he's like, no, we've pretty much lived in like the same area or neighborhood. I'm like, you've only moved like neighborhoods. Like I can't tell if that excitement is coming from like pure like it's fascination, but it's like am I like, wow, I'm glad that isn't me, or am I also like, oh my god, I'm like so jealous. Like that's
Yeah,
so
very
much less
interesting.
hassle and everything. It's
Like,
it's weird, but
they
also
must
like
know
I
everything.
don't know. I know they you just kind of sit and you're like, I'm like, so you have like reached like clarity levels of like 1,000. You know what you want to do. You know everything about the town. Like you could drive around with your eyes closed and still make it home, while I get lost on like two left turns. But it's like it,
Left turns.
and I don't know. They baffle me, and it's like it's almost like I want to like study them and like pick their brains
Oh
and be
my
like, so
gosh.
what is it like for you?
I'm not sure. We don't have to like full on examine them. I should have one on the show one time, and we can do a full interrogation. That would be fun. Just I want to
Yeah.
know
I
exactly
should
what
too.
they.
I've been like trying to work in a way to get the kids who aren't military children to come on because they
Yeah.
keep asking, and I'm like, I want you
Yeah.
to.
Awkward. Yeah.
I don't
Happened to
know
me too.
how, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely odd situation whenever someone has to do that. I'm like, yes, I want to talk to you. I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, but obviously it's dedicated to
Yeah.
military brats at the moment and probably for the
Mhm.
foreseeable future. So, what are some other
I
things
mean,
that you enjoy other than podcasting? That's all we talk
other
about
than
all the time.
podcasting,
I just assume that's your only personality. I'm sorry. I'm sure you do something else.
I no. Other than podcasting, well, I'm not insanely big on sports. I do figure skating. I love
Oh,
figure
that's yeah.
skating. But other than that, my big like passion thing, other my passion project that just got cleared. I'm really into film. I love filmmaking.
Yeah.
That's kind of something that like I've been trying to develop for myself a little bit more in the future, since I would like to do more for that as a career. But I run the film club at my school. We just got cleared to make our first short film, which is like
That's
that's
awesome. Yeah.
crazy. They so I pulled an old I wrote like the film, I wrote it myself. I have like all of these different people coming to help and everything, and so I like to have that sense of like control, but also like artistic control, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's like a
I'm like
creative freedom that you can have.
I'm producing
It's
all these. Yes, I have liberties and creative freedoms, but I also like to hear what other people have to say about it. And I think to kind of pair with like my film interest, I'm very into business and like the business degrees and things like that, because
yeah.
that's also been something I've been looking into. And I love marketing and things like that, and that kind of aspect behind it. So that's why I kind of had fun doing the Instagram page for my show and everything, and developing that, because I was like, oh well, like this will be fun. Like I can design this to look the way I want it to, and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's pretty much, yeah.
Having that control, that completely understand where you're coming from on that. I didn't do a ton of film stuff in high school, but that's very exciting, and that's something you could totally do like beyond high school. And there's a lot of freedoms with that, and a lot of exciting opportunities. And your college applications are gonna look awesome because like you already started doing that, and you got a podcast and whatnot. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. Best of luck doing that going forward.
Thank you.
And maybe we can follow up at some
Oh,
point on the show and see how everything's going. But For now, I think
Yes, that's
that's
fabulous.
yeah, that would be fabulous. That would be awesome. And then I know we're going to be talking to the museum director, and hopefully we can collaborate on some other things. And we're going to keep our podcasts in touch. And I think I'm going to be joining New Orleans in just a second.
Yes,
But yeah, very
absolutely. No
excited.
need for the bad blood, right? Like,
No, no
absolutely,
bad blood.
we got.
But like,
Yes,
we'll
exactly.
see how the views come out. We'll see. Well,
Oh yeah. Well, if one of us is clearly teetering in the other direction, then I don't know. Maybe
I
something will
might have to
happen, but
disconnect. We'll see. Oh my. Okay.
might have to let things
Okay. Thank you everyone for watching the Shannon Show. This has been an absolute blast talking with Averie Gannon. I'll see you guys next week, and thank you very much, Averie.
No problem, of course.
It's the Shannon Show, Shannon Show, the Shannon Show, Shannon Show, the Shannon Show.